hear you. Speak up, Terry.
Terry MacAlister, representing the Cambridge Commons, which has been referenced, and a Newnham resident. Absolutely fascinating talk, George. And I visited Bristol for one of the first times about 6 months ago, and I was fascinated by your talk because I totally fell in love with Bristol, and my wife will tell you, who's in the front there, that I said we need to move to Bristol. The atmosphere there is so different. It just sorry, but it is relevant. It's so different, and it's fascinating to hear you dissect what you did that made some of that possible. My question is to everybody on the panel, if they feel able to come up with one initiative that they would put forward that we could all build on to make Cambridge a better place in the way that George came up with half a dozen initiatives.
Okay, so that's one for everyone. Let's start with James.
Well, I'm particularly taken with the opening of the street. So, yes, I think the opening of the streets, as George said, I think has the greatest potential to catch people's imagination. It's experimental, it can show what can be done, it's easily done, it's cheap, it's affordable, and I think people will buy into it. Yeah, that would be my number one.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think alongside that then I'll go with much improved facilities for pedestrians and for cyclists so that we can help encourage people out of their motorised vehicles.
Okay, I would like to see more multiple housing in the city centre that is based on mixed-use development, particularly at street level.
I think John and I can have to stretch here, but I would say we've just started it, which is a spaces and movement strategy for the city to decode and understand the way in which the city works and can be made to work much better for people.
And for me, it's find a way of getting the schools involved.
I'm Jane Singleton. I'm here as part of the Residents' Association of Old Newnham. I want to ask about air pollution in Cambridge. We've heard that the Greater Cambridge Partnership is spending $200,000 on a study which will take place over the next few years and involve a public consultation. In the meantime, 47 people a year die of illnesses caused by the pollution. Can we afford to wait for the studies to be completed in 2020, or should we be asking for something to be done now?
Are you asking anyone in particular?
Perhaps if I could ask Stephen and Tony.
Okay, thank you.
The City Council is in fact already doing work on something called the Air Quality Management Plan, which has just recently been updated. So of course we need to think about and understand through data the key challenges and sources, but actually work is ongoing at the moment. And for those of you that are interested, the Council's Air Quality Management Plan I think has just been reviewed for the purposes of precisely engaging with some of these issues that are more immediate and starting to outline the way in which the Council and others have a role in addressing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think the City Council Air Quality Plan was out for consultation very recently. I don't know quite what stage that's at. But my reading of it was that it was very unambitious, and that you're quite right that I mean, how would Cambridge react if 47 cyclists were killed in a year? There'd be absolute outrage and we'd be demanding action. Well, you know, the fact that 47 people are killed by some invisible gases and pollution shouldn't deter us from taking very serious action.
This is a sort of question. I would like to question the power of developers and the relationship with planners. We're currently battling with developers and we don't seem to be getting much help from the planners. So I'm kind of wondering where the power lies,
So is that another
Developers come with lots of money. Yes, yeah.
I suspect if you were to ask a group of developers, they would say the planners are not being supportive and helpful to the developers. What we're engaged in is a very delicate, oftentimes, arbitration process sitting between the two parties and trying to structure outcomes that reflect policies that we have developed as obviously as part of that democratic process, that achieve a whole suite of objectives. George talked about being brave. Sometimes people are not supportive of bravery in the process, but we have a number of compelling challenges, whether they're transport or homes or making new housing or even addressing some of the concerns about traffic generation and growth. The most obvious of which is about where we put houses and homes going forwards and the consequences for the decisions, whether it be density or indeed vehicle usage to get to the places in the city that those more dispersed locations that people wish us to engage with also precipitate. So it is, I'm sorry if people feel we're not supportive. We have a very, my planning team is absolutely committed to doing the best that we possibly can for the city, but that's a city of wide-ranging interests, and we do have to try and balance those sometimes.
It would be very, very hard to disagree with that particular problem. I mean, I think globally developers have too much power. I mean, that's one of the major aspects of globalization, and it's really one of the main factors that we grapple with every city all over the world at this point. So Cambridge is not different than other places. I mean, just to pick up on your point, Stephen, about the planning initiatives that are going on now, which seem to me to be very, very positive, and perhaps picking up speed and momentum that we really haven't seen for quite a while here in Cambridge. And it would seem to me also that groups like this need to be supporting these sorts of initiatives as much as the planners need to be supporting the residents' associations. It's very much a two-way street. And hopefully that will be one of the outcomes of this sort of meeting.
Cambridge has other players. For example, Cambridge Ahead, Cambridge Network, One Nucleus, a whole raft of business lobby groups. Now, membership of Cambridge Ahead is 10,000 per organisation per year. FeCRA are asking people to stick a fiver in a bucket at the end of this evening. How does a residence or a civic voice stand a chance against a well-funded business lobby which can, get access and get influence in a way which is very hard for grassroots organisations to do?
Yes, I think every city has it, and don't blame the planners. It's too easy to blame the planners, they get blamed for everything. But the planning system is quite a weak one, and the developers have the advantage in many respects, and the planning system is quite reactive. We don't have enough time for positive planning, and we should invest more time in thinking about what sort of place we want to be and how to define what that place is, and to take that as the model for development. I don't believe in telling the developers what to do, but I do believe in sharing with them the sort of place that we need to create, and being brave enough to say no to crap development, because there's an awful lot of it about, and we need to have a planning system that rewards good architecture, beautiful placemaking, that brings activity, that does the sort of thing that Bristol developer has done, bringing 30 independents into a single place. It should be a rewarding system as well as a punishing system, and it should encourage beauty in a place like Cambridge.
Yes.
Allister, and I'd just like to know about the affordable homes.
Can you lift the mic to your nose?
Where, about the affordable homes, where will they be located? Because if it's in Hertfordshire, then you're talking about a substantial amount of transport. How many homes and where? Because you want to balance it with green spaces.
Okay. Anyone in particular? Speak up.
In fact, obviously the way that we're delivering at the moment is alongside private housing, and in fact the city has a very good track record of delivering up to 40% of new homes alongside that private development. And there are very clear policy objectives that we have about being tenure blind, about being mixed, and about phasing the delivery of those affordable homes so that communities grow together and at the same time. So all of the strategic allocations that are in our local plan, hopefully adopted shortly, but all of those allocations include expectations, legal obligations that affordable homes, including shared ownership, homes to rent and so on, are delivered alongside. And of course the City Council has a partnership at the moment to deliver for itself with a developer affordable new social rented homes in the city.
Thank you. James, would you like to talk?
Yes, without sort of repeating previous answers here, Steve did an admirable job there of trying to make it a bad do really. That this is again a flaw of the planning and the development system in this country in terms of local authorities not being able to build social housing, but primarily it's also about developers not wanting to build lots of houses because why would they? That would reduce their value and their profits. So we have a system which basically is perpetuating an affordability crisis that once Stephen's plans passed later this year, there would in effect be allocation for 30,000 new units? 40,000. So it's 40,000. Plans already for 40,000, but they won't build 40,000 very quickly because why would they? House prices will fall through the floor. So there is a problem nationally, which is why there's a national affordable housing crisis. So Stephen's trying to put a brave face on something which actually has no control over, and this is really central government policy.
Can I just say one thing? I started building council houses again in Bristol for the first time for 30 years. But they'll be sold. I think we should rethink that. We need social housing, it should be social housing, it should be there forever.
I'd just like to add that the 30 or 40,000 new homes that are going to be going up in and around Cambridge in the next decade or so, it's vitally important that these are built to the highest energy efficiency standards, because if they're not, then within a decade of them being built, they're going to have to undergo very costly retrofit, and in the meantime, consumers will have paid far more for their energy bills than they will have needed to.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Dan Greef. I'm the Labour candidate in the City election in Edith. Sorry about that. Shocking. I was just going to raise a question about development, but I think you've kind of addressed that. But the other half of what you said about housing and transport, and these aren't necessarily the routes to go down to think about in some ways with city development, but it seems pretty clear to me that public transport is really a massive problem in this area, and privatisation has meant there are a few companies that have a complete monopoly, so it's all very well, and I completely agree with green spaces and cycling, and I cycle everywhere in Cambridge. But then I speak to people who are in Camborne or North Stowe, a new development that's happening now. And yes, there are some cyclists there. You can't expect everyone to. So where is the good bus service, bringing people in? And instead what we have is a system that's made for profit, so people then feel they probably have to drive their car in, and then they have to park. So I think we've got to tackle that issue. And then the other thing I'd say is, the reason that people have to live further out of Cambridge is because the affordable housing, which I'm so proud that this council now is providing more affordable social housing. Oh, sorry. How do we deal with those monopolies in transport? Discuss.
Well, I'm not sure. The new mayor now has powers, if he wishes to introduce a bus franchising scheme, I think, similar to London. A lot of people are asking him to do that. Let's hope he does.
And to be honest, you can't do it in isolation as a city. That is one issue where the combined authority definitely makes sense if they tackle it correctly. But it is difficult. We've got 12 different bus operators in Bristol. There are 2 dominant ones, but it's a bit of a muddle.
I have a quick. I'm Mickey Marion. I'm a Hills Road resident, and I'd like to ask George, please. He seems to have shown the strong leadership that we badly need here to get through the promised residence schemes, for instance, which have been promised but not delivered. I just would like to ask you why you weren't re-elected. In the context of Sam's points about us being relatively powerless.
Yeah, well, in a way I signed my own death warrant because it wasn't just my attitude. I also felt that our council was in permanent election mode. They had a third re-election every year. And so it's no sooner as somebody elected that they're thinking about the next election. And so I decided to not force, but persuade the council to have all-out elections every 4 years. That meant, and I had a council of 68 party members. I was the only independent. 34 wards, about 8 to 10 candidates standing in each ward. So virtually I had over 300 people standing against me, as well as the mayoral candidates, all delivering their leaflets, all saying what they wanted to say about me, whether it was true or not. It is, and also some people still hadn't experienced some of the change and were judging it out of fear rather than because people do. So I think it was just a combination of things. I mean, I got over it within 5 minutes. I thought, well, I did my best. I would like to feel, though, that politicians could do those things and get re-elected. I think they can. I think I took them by surprise in the first instance as an independent, but once they realise you're a serious threat, then they will get organised. You know, the big parties will get organised to get you out. I share a lot of, you know, we had a Labour councillor speaking there. I share a lot of the ethos. I'm sure we agree on many, many things. But I did find that there is too much caution to make change in parties because they need to get re-elected. And that is their raison d'etre.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
Oh yes, I just wanted to ask if anyone... It's Tony Booth from Newtown. I just wanted to ask if anyone had ideas about how we could reduce the reliance of the City Council on revenue from car parking. It's around maybe 11 million per annum, and we need a new plan.
Well, actually what I did raise more revenue from parking through the residents' parking schemes. So, in exchange, I asked them to take away parking in the city centre. And, I mean, in Copenhagen, for instance, they take away about 5% a year. I expect that we took away about 20% in 3 years. That gets noticed, but the contribution from residents' parking schemes and the meter parking that went alongside it, or the ticket parking that went alongside it, actually brought in much more. So maybe I'm to blame. I was to blame.
Okay. Allan, what was your question?
Allan Brigham, Eastern Road Action Group. Everybody seems to accept the need for more affordable housing. So my question is really, why have we built a necklace of so-called student housing around Cambridge, which could have been affordable housing, and we have a site of really successful affordable housing in Montreal Square, which we want to knock down? What's gone wrong? Has it gone wrong? And why can't people who have small houses have gardens? Because I think people who have small houses, actually their garden is the biggest room in their house. And at the moment, people feel there's a conspiracy against them.
trying to think about the simple way of answering. Why would you build student accommodation? Because students compete for other accommodation, and removing or making sure that we can provide high quality homes for students so that they don't compete for our open the general needs accommodation is an important part of what I recognise will need to be a wider housing strategy that seeks to deal with all forms of tenure and all forms of housing, including the right homes in the right place, family homes, but also homes for the increasingly smaller households that we're seeing being formed across the country, in which gardens play different roles. I think Wendy might have some thoughts on the same subject.
I would like to, yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more that the garden is sometimes the most important room in the house, and that is very often the case with relatively small houses. We have studies that have been done all over the world that show how tiny gardens can exist within very, very dense housing projects. Coming back to the whole issue of multiple housing. Multiple housing doesn't need to be nasty housing blocks that nobody wants. There are many creative examples, it's just that we don't see that many of them here in Cambridge. And with roof gardens, balconies, small terraces, little courtyards, I mean, there are many ways of doing that. It requires better design. Yes.
I'd just like to say something about student housing. I think it's a big mistake that we are putting students into student ghettos. I do think that they should be part of the fabric of the place, and that affordable housing and student housing shouldn't actually be separated in the way we separate it, and that we should have much more mixed communities rather than these blocks of student housing. It's something I feel very strongly about in Bristol. I think we could have a much more thriving city if we took that attitude.
Hi, I'm King. I'm just a resident of Cambridge, but I got North Road. It's actually a question for George. Somebody asked something similar. I was going to ask, because as far as I can see, Bristol is very similar to Cambridge. You've got a lot of green space, you've got transport problems, you've got a lack of affordability, you've got a lot of deprivation in some areas. And we had projects like the Metro project, which were highly controversial. Is there one thing that you could think of that you would have done differently, which might have made a significant difference in getting re-elected? Because in reality, 3.5 years is not enough time to affect significant change. So is there any project like the Metro project or anything like that, or consulting more with people rather than less, that you think might have made a significant difference and allowed you to carry on with your plan?
No, I'm not saying I did everything right, but I can't think of any one thing that would have fundamentally changed it, apart from having at least a 5 or 6 year term. I think people need time for things to bed in. And in some German cities, they have 8-year terms for mayors. That gives time, for instance, to install a tramway system that creates havoc while it's being installed. It would take, within 3 or 4 years, you would have a city dug up and no tram. So I do think maybe we need to look at slightly longer terms in order to make the changes bed in to enable people to judge them properly. But I say that without an ounce of bitterness. I mean, my life is better not being mayor. Personally, it's a bit frustrating watching things that I'd like to happen not happening. But I like to try and support the new mayor in making the positive things that we both agree on. But it's not I don't regard it as a defeat. I feel what's important is we're true to ourselves, but I honestly do believe, I had a particularly short term because it was out of sequence with others, so it was 3.5 years. I don't think 4 years is enough for that sort of leadership. I do think we need time to make the change.